Welcome to JonesingLife, where we uncover the extraordinary in everyday people. Today with me, our first guest, my friend, Ryan Croft. Ryan, thank you for being on the first episode of JonesingLife.
Eric, thank you, man. Happy to be here. Excited for
Yeah.
it.
A quick introduction. So I think something that's really cool about JonesingLife is that in the world of celebrities, tech stars, all this stuff, you get to meet celebrities. I honestly find some of the most interesting people in the neighborhood or at school parties where you meet parents. And with us today, as I said, Ryan's a very interesting individual. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's done everything from transportation to fintech. He's had a toy startup. And, we will touch upon this at some point in time. You were a baseball scout. So thanks for being on. I know that you have a fascinating background. What you've done is even being an entrepreneur, right? The roller coaster of up and downs. Someone's going to be inspired when they hear to you. Do you remember how we first met and about when we first met?
Yeah, first, listen, thanks. I'm really excited for this. I think it's a great concept, and I agree. There's a lot of interesting people out there that maybe the average person doesn't know, so it's a great concept and a great idea for a podcast. I do remember it was, maybe 2017, 2018, somewhere in that range. It was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at Carnegie Mellon, as a matter of fact.
Correct. And it's interesting because you're totally, if people don't know, both myself and Ryan live in the DC area. So to then be in a place and like, oh, where are you from? And they even in the same, I think at that point it might have been the same neighborhood-ish here in Arlington that we connected. And they were like, oh, this is a cool guy. We were at a small business conference at Carnegie Mellon.
That's right.
At that point, I was with the Small Business Administration, and you were working on a TransitScreen?
Correct. Yeah. So my last company that I started, TransitScreen, now known as Action Figure, Washington, D.C., at that time, San Francisco-based company, aggregation of real-time data, selling to real estate companies and large corporations. And I believe it was a conference around entrepreneurship through the State Department. And it was a predecessor to the Global Entrepreneurship Summit that I attended in India a few months later. So yeah, it was a great event, and obviously Carnegie Mellon's a world-class place to meet. So we've come full circle. Now, here we are.
Pop quiz. I don't know if you're going to get this one right. Do you know the second time we met?
I believe we grabbed coffee, arranged each other at a grocery store a little bit later.
I think even before that, I think I was wandering into the next time your shirt was off. So with that being said,
give us some more detail.
It was a mother-child, father-child swim lessons at Washington Liberty. And sometimes you walk in, you're like, this guy's face looks familiar. We're both not wearing shirts, only wearing some bathing suits. Do I say, hey, where do I know you from? So something else that you luck out with. And I think when you go, how are you friends with these people? Both Ryan and I both look out that we have two of our kids are essentially the same ages. And then that's how you get to know each other. That's your friend crowd. But that was it. We were taking swim lessons with our eldest kids at Washington and Liberty. And I don't know if you know that Washington Liberty is known for being the cold pool versus Yorktown, which is the other large high school, the three high schools in our area. Is known as the warm pool. So,
Didn't know that.
I think
I'm not a big fan of the cold pool, especially in the winter.
No, it was, and by the end of the class, you get these kids who are maybe one that are just shivering all over the place, and it's like, hey, 30 minutes, you need to get in and out. But that's then I think we had our coffee. We've hung out during the pandemic. I know everyone kind of went different ways. We ended up reconnecting when you said, how are you dealing with kids? And at that point, we had outsourced it. We found a great bilingual school, a great daycare center in the area with people who really cared about our children. But yeah, that's how. And before you know it, 6, 7 years later, still buddies.
Time flies. You're having fun.
So, going back, the road, the roller coaster of being an entrepreneur is very interesting. Walk me through. I know you grew up in the area, but then
Yep.
you graduate college. What do you do?
Yeah, happy to give you the background. I guess it's a little bit uncharacteristic in terms of the normal path to a career. I grew up in the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area, went to school for international business and Latin American studies, and lived in Spain for a semester. I was completely taken by the Spanish culture and really said, I don't want to get a typical consulting government job. And it pulled me down to the Dominican Republic, where in my early 20s, I spent 2 years and was running around the island as
Could you speak Spanish at that point when you first went down there, or?
I would say I had a basic knowledge. I had, a degree in Latin American studies and a minor, but it really kind of codifies your Spanish ability when you're forced to speak it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And did you just go down there, or did you say like, hey, I have this plan. There's a job here. Like, I know what I'm doing.
I had a family friend who was living in Santo Domingo with the State Department, a diplomat, and very graciously they offered to put me up for a couple months if I wanted to come down. And I was volunteering at an orphanage originally just to get myself there. And that turned into, a variety of different companies that I started, including a baseball scouting agency. So I was just completely...
Talk about that. So you go down there, you're chatting with, or you're really doing some great work, right?
Yeah.
Interesting opportunity. What year did you graduate college, by the way?
I was 2006, and a month later, I moved to the Dominican Republic.
Okay, all right. I'm always putting time frames in place, and then so you're in the DR, and then you say, I want to. Did you do a lot of baseball prior to opening a scouting business? How did you do that?
Yeah, I was more of a lacrosse and basketball player, but played lacrosse on the club team in James Madison. But I was just completely taken by the religion that is baseball. I mean, number one most popular sport in the Dominican Republic is baseball, and it has been for decades. And at one point, it was the highest per capita pro athlete to nation ratio in the world. So there is an outlier effect of Dominicans who are great at baseball. So I was traveling all over the island, met a bunch of different people, had the chance to meet Sammy Sosa, Moises Alou, Felipe Alou, Juan Marichal. I just had, incredible...
There's some good name drops. We've all heard of those players.
Hall of Fame players that it's a very small island at the end of the day. And I started meeting some of the top agents that were cultivating talent and finding young players to go and train at academies and then try out for all your major teams. I mean, at that point, 31 of 32 teams had academies down there, brick and mortar, housing and fields for all their players to play. And I just jumped right in, signed a bunch of players, and then had the chance to bring them to the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, the Marlins, the Red Sox. And, it was an interesting time for a 22-year-old, 23-year-old in a foreign country.
It is, I mean, as we chat with everyone and as life goes on, everyone in their youth is like, how can I get involved in sports one way or another? Because as you're playing at some point in time, I think it was my freshman year in college, I realized, oh my God, like I probably am not going to make a career. For me, it was playing professional football. I need to find something else. But if you can be involved in the game one way or another, I think that's a great way to extend the dream. I know that having worked in the movie industry at Disney and Fox, Warner Brothers, I felt like everybody was somewhat of a closet director, closet producer, closet actor who's doing the finance jobs, the marketing jobs, just because it's a cool industry to be around. So you're doing the baseball scouting thing, and then you pivot, or not pivot, you probably are just involved in a lot of things. You started doing travel, right? Because I know you've been all over the world.
Right.
Cool places.
So, listen, after 2 years, I really recognize that they don't call it the farm leagues for nothing. It's a long process to get someone from a prospect to signing a minor league deal to the pros. And I didn't think it was going to be my life's calling necessarily. So I moved back to the DC area and I got involved in travel. And the way that I did that, I started an adventure travel and tourist company called Croft Global Travel. And I used to lead trips for 5 or 6 years all over the world, but primarily with a focus on Latin America. So I'd take groups of 2 to 22 people to the Dominican Republic, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, all through Central America and the Caribbean, and was able to show people a little bit more of a local vibe, a local experience rather than your cookie cutter cruises and all inclusive resorts.
Now, so you said adventure. What was the coolest adventure in your mind that you took people on?
Yeah, I mean, I really think all of Latin America is special. There's a lot of incredible beauty and culture and really richness of the heritage. But in particular, I loved Argentina. I thought it was a really dynamic country. The trip that I remember most.
And where in Argentina? Because you have everything from Iguazu Falls, which is on par with Niagara. I would even say I think the water
Probably
flow
bigger.
of Iguazu is a lot bigger. And then you have down to Patagonia. So wide variety, similar to the States. If Florida versus Montana, you're getting a little bit different experience. So kind of within Argentina, what were the things that you thought were the best?
Yeah, this was a trip specifically to Mendoza. So it was sort of wine tasting and biking all through the wine country. And there was one day in particular that we took a detour and, went with a guide up and hiked up through a mountain. And there was a freak snowstorm that happened, which is pretty common actually in that region. Not that we knew about it, but there was some people on the trip with shorts on, short sleeves, and just didn't expect that to come.
Because they do say there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just bad clothing.
Bad preparation for sure.
Yeah.
And, it was a memorable experience. We kind of had to change our plans and ended up
So
going.
do you guys get stuck out there?
We almost got stuck. The car was having some issues. There's a van up in the top of the mountains, and our driver ended up saying, "I'm sorry for this. I'll take you to a smaller mountain." And then we went back to his house and had like a big barbecue at his house and, a real kind of local experience. And, a bunch of people from Argentina hosted us. And, sometimes it's not exactly the destination that is the memorable part. It's the trip to get there and the experience of it all. So
it's interesting that you talk about the journey, because I know as an entrepreneur, as someone who, I don't know how many, you've started up a bunch of businesses, and even chatting with you, there's some days that I'm like, this guy is king, right? He's sitting on top of the world. Everything's going well. And you're like, just give it a couple hours. Let that new email come in and can ruin it all. So, your experience working in the travel industry is probably metaphorically the journey of what you've seen throughout other ventures.
No doubt.
And then go on.
Just one piece on that is, I think Mark Andreessen just had a quote recently who said, as a startup founder, there's really only two feelings that you get to feel. One is euphoria, one is terror. And the lack of sleep really works to emphasize both, or really accelerate both. So I think there's extreme highs and there's extreme lows in entrepreneurship, and you've got to be willing to, stay even keeled. And the highs are never as good as you think they are, and the bad days really, when you put in perspective, are just part of the journey. So definitely the analogy works.
Have you always had partners with the different ventures, and how's that? So, good or bad?
I would say I've only started businesses with other people, really, and I think personally I'm an extrovert, and I think that the journey is more fun with other people, especially when you can do it with your friends.
I will say, like, walking around Arlington, you bump into people all the time, and it's a great quality to have. And then also introducing folks. There's times when we'll have a conversation. You go, "Oh, Eric, here's this guy. Like, he's doing this, and this. You should chat with him." And that's something that you should always keep, on. Never lose that quality for anyone. I think being a connector, the old song, like, your friends are my friends are your friends, always introducing people. I know that's something that I've appreciated, amongst our friend group, right? Like, there's a bunch of people who did not grow up here. And to be a connector is great.
100%. Totally agree.
I want to talk about your toy company that you had, because that was kind of a derivative. I know a lot of what you have done has been, at least the last two bigger companies have been in the tech space. Yeah. But you had a cool little project that my kids even got to enjoy. Yeah. Projectogram, right?
Yeah. So, this is kind of I'd say a derivative of the pandemic, where a friend of mine out in California we were talking about the challenges of trying to keep your kids occupied during the pandemic. Kids are staying at home, a lot more stress on working parents. And really, he and another guy had the idea for a very simple sort of photography toy product, where you're able to kind of combine nostalgic old toys and old photos and put it in the hands of kids and allow them to kind of have fun with it. And it's something that I've been a part of since the beginning. And, more
I know my
recently,
kids had a good time with it, being able to project. We had some dinosaurs, right? You could even just use at times when we've lost the films, you can just use a flashlight, and it's amazing how that's a cool toy for them to enjoy. Hopefully not using it as a weapon too often with amongst each other. But I know that was good. And that kind of, you met some people to then, I know that wasn't the only venture that this group of folks have worked on, correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of an evolution. My partner, Gordon, out in San Francisco, he and I worked together on the kids' toy product Projectogram. And then, we both crossed paths in the Dominican Republic. We lived near each other, ran the same friend circles a decade and a half ago. He spent a career in technology at a variety of different places, including Apple. And ultimately, we went back down to Latin America, where we originally met, and said, we see an opportunity here. We see a very large market in Mexico that seems underserved by technology. And that was really the inspiration for Pacto, the company that I'm a co-founder of today.
Awesome. And so then you've done Pacto. The people who are probably listening to this are not the same group that's in Silicon Valley listening to. I have a lot of friends, and maybe a couple are there, but I would say more eclectic group. What is Pacto? What do you guys do?
Sure. So we're a software company based in Mexico City, and I'd say primarily we serve banks and small merchants. So the easiest analogy I can give is Toast in the US, or Square, where it's an operating system and integrated payment software for small merchants. And we went to market really serving the merchants directly, and then very quickly realized that the banks primarily run businesses and they run the market in Latin America. So we pivoted more to B2B service for the banks that they then bundle and give to the merchants. So it's a payment application software for bank terminals and point of sale for small merchants. And it's allowed us to get in, work with some of the best taquerias and bakeries and coffee shops and all across Mexico.
And talk a little bit about taqueria. Talk a little bit, right? Talk a little bit about. That was pretty cool how I just pulled that out right there. About what it's like running an international business, time zones, language, working with different folks. Talk about some of the good things associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. I'd say there are pros and cons of running and owning and co-founding a business in another country. One is the ability, both the pro and con, to get to Mexico. Mexico is a really dynamic place. Economy, 130 million people, 1.3 trillion GDP, and some of the best natural environment, lakes, rivers, beaches, islands you'll ever see, underwater ecosystems. Also some of the best food in the world, synonymous with salsa, tacos, and quesadillas. Yeah. There's 100 other types of foods that are fantastic and equally diverse. And the quality of people, tequila, mezcal, sotol. So Mexico City, for those who haven't gone,
and food wise, I want to say, do you know where the Caesar salad was originally invented?
I believe it was Mexico, ironically, by a aspiring restaurateur.
In Tijuana. So, sidetrack, because that's what we should do. Is we went to Tijuana and we went to some restaurant. They're like, this is the home of the Caesar salad. So that's what we had. So I agree with you on all the great food from the taquerias, but also the Caesar salad.
And also even more, if you go to Mexico City and you walk around like the natural cityscape of Condesa, Roma, Polanco, you think you're in Rome, or you think you're in Spain.
And what part of the country is that in? I know Mexico City, I think middle. I think Cancun, kind of the Gulf of Mexico area, Acapulco, Pacific. But the the areas you're talking about, where are they within Mexico?
So it's in Mexico City. These are neighborhoods in Mexico City, 23 million person metropolis. There's a lot of nice little neighborhoods. And I would say a fun fact is the bakeries and baked goods, kind of like coffee shops, are some of the best in the world. You wouldn't think that with Mexico. You'd think more taquerias, which are great, but also the bakeries are world class.
The tying into traveling, and I suspect from your previous life of being truly adventurous, it must be fun, and especially also working with small businesses. Small businesses are not cookie cutter. Every time you walk into a new location, they're unique, they're different, they're passionate. The owners' blood, sweat, and tears are in that building. I don't know how it is in Mexico, but a lot of small businesses, right? You're like, oh, I run a small business. Small business is synonymous with family business.
Totally.
And while mom and dad might have opened it, grandma, grandpa are helping out. The kids are in there. So, just culturally, it must be fascinating meeting all these unique individuals associated with.
And it's actually more pronounced in Mexico. So in the US, about half of all of the small restaurants in general are enterprises and half are, mom and pops. Whereas 96-97% of the restaurants in Mexico are mom and pop. So it's really way less enterprise, way less chains and franchises. It's more mom and pop. That's really the lifeblood and kind of the engine of the economy in Mexico are these small merchants.
Great. Before we move on, or I guess we're kind of moving on, you've seen a lot, you read a lot, your fingers on the pulse of what's going on. When you think about 2025, 2035, what are you most excited about? And where do you think, someone who's starting off a business, what they should be doing or looking at? And obviously the ball's always moving, the ball's always changing, but you have a pretty good insight. You have your finger on the ball.
Definitely.
We'll come back in 10 years and look at this. So we're going to mark it about 22 minutes into the podcast. Ryan's giving his decade prediction.
I would say in terms of, if someone is listening right now, what's coming and what they could do today, really regardless of age, I would say number one is AI. AI really is a world-changing technology. And I feel like we're in the very early innings of its potential. And obviously you always have to balance that with risk, but there's a lot of potential and ways that AI can help in a variety of different industries and for people all over the world. And second, I would say the value of traveling the world. I mean, you're coming from someone who's been to 50 countries, lived overseas in multiple countries and speaks different languages. So for me, I think for my kids and just anyone starting out, taking the time, getting in, immersing yourself in another culture, traveling overseas, living, working overseas is really an important thing. And then the last thing I would say is get outside. We have a loneliness epidemic now in our country, and I think it's twofold. One is people are spending a lot more time indoors, maybe some product of the pandemic, but meet other people, get in nature. I think it's really, really important for the next 10 years.
I love that you say that. I was experimenting early on. I've been out of entertainment for about 2 decades. And I wanted to get back involved in it. And people said, why are you doing the JonesingLife podcast? And originally, and really it's for me. If mom and dad listen to it and the guest, I hope you and your family listen to it because
that's
you're
what
on
matters.
it.
That's what matters.
But it was, when you talk about getting out of nature, I've actually experimented with some different lavaliers to go on walks. And from my time in working in the federal government and when I was working at the DFC with Development Finance Corporation and traveling all over the world, they talk about diplomats always go for walks because it's a way to break attention. And if you're ever in a negotiation with someone and things are going poorly, you say, hey, let's get up and go for a walk. And unfortunately for podcasts, you need audio. And I don't have the right lavaliers yet. But I do think at a certain point in time, I'd love to experiment, really just going on a walk and having a conversation with someone, getting out you just experience, you open up, you chat, not only it's also good from a health perspective, it's good for a mental perspective. Think of how many times that when we have drop-offs and amongst our dad group, you're just like, hey, let's go for a walk. And it's very therapeutic. it's therapy.
If there's one thing that a lot of my old teammates would tell you is that guy's obsessed with walking meetings, and it's for that exact reason. I think my brain works better when I'm in movement, regardless of it's biking, running, walking. It just triggers something else in the body that helps you think more clearly and gets you out of your rut.
Yeah. Ryan, thank you for coming on the JonesingLife podcast.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. For you, if anyone's out there and who wants connect with Ryan on LinkedIn. He has awesome posts. If you're in the DMV area on February 21st, 2025, Ryan is an entrepreneur. Am I saying it right? Entrepreneur fellow at Georgetown. So
Entrepreneur
they have
residence. Yep.
Venture in the Capital. Wow, that was a really good play on words. At Georgetown University. I know he is going to be there. We didn't even dive into how good of a dad you are, but you're a great dad, and
appreciate that.
Have fun with all these ventures that you go on. Enjoy when you're really riding high, because I know that there's the ups and downs. And thanks again for being a part of the JonesingLife podcast.
Love it. Thanks so much for the info or the introduction. All right, man.
I'll see you soon.